So the topic of today's sermon is gratitude in times of uncertainty. I try to pay attention to the divine order that impacts my life. And with that, I feel that Spirit has been providing me or provides me information that I need either for myself or to share with others. And during these past few weeks, the message that has been coming to me is to look at uncertainty. Serendipitously, in Paul's service 2 weeks ago, he spoke about how change is a certainty. And if that is so, and if we have little impact on the constant change that is a certainty in our life, then uncertainty is also a constant. We don't know what changes are to come. Thank you, Reverend Paul. We live our lives in the illusion of certainty. We think things will be the way we assume they will be. But 2020 was quite a spiritual classroom for all of us, wasn't it? We all got really clear on uncertainty this year. We struggled, if you were like me, and I have struggled with it. We've struggled with the uncertainty of COVID. We've struggled with not being able to connect with our loved ones, not being able to touch our loved ones, not being able to buy toilet paper. And not to mention the uncertainty of politics and this election. You know, last time we were together, we were quite certain, it was the Saturday after the election, or the Sunday after the election, that Biden had won, and it was all done with. And we're still waiting for Donald Trump to concede 3 weeks later. Yes, uncertainty. So how do we live with uncertainty as our companion? Especially now with COVID on the resurgence, and just as we move into these cold and dark months of winter. So I've been sitting with that question. And then I realized the answer to that question came from all of you. You answered that question in our first conscious conversation gathering back in July. And most of you, not most of you, but many of you were certainly on that conversation. And the topic was lessons and blessings and challenges of the pandemic. Many of you might remember it. We discussed what we felt, what were our experiences, what were our takeaways, what were our challenges, and certainly our lessons and blessings. And mostly, if I remember correctly, the landing point that many of you went to was gratitude. You shared your gratitude. You shared your gratitude in things like noticing how blue the sky was in April, in noticing how the birds seemed to have sung more clearly or more loudly or with more joy than they had seemed to in a very, very long time. Or maybe we just couldn't notice it before. You noticed that the air seemed cleaner and that the earth seemed quieter. You shared your gratitude about all these things. And though many of you were challenged by many points, you recognized somehow the gifts you were grateful for through this adversity. I was really quite taken back by that. So my invitation today to us as a community is to explore gratitude as a spiritual tool, as a muscle for us to build and grow, to be a touchstone for us to go back to in our lives as we move through these upcoming months. Dr. Robert Emmons is the world's leading scientific expert on gratitude, and he explains the following. He says that gratitude has two components. First, he says, it is the affirmation of goodness, and that we affirm that there are good things in the world and gifts and benefits we've received. And the second part of gratitude he sees it as is that we recognize that these sources of goodness are outside of ourselves. Dr. Emmons shares the following in his studies about gratitude in tough times. He says, as I was learning about this research, I was a little bit skeptical. Life can be brutal at times. Sometimes just surviving can feel like an accomplishment. Can you really feel grateful in times of loss? And his response to that question was, yes, you can. He says, in fact, findings show that adversity can boost gratitude. In a web-based survey that tracked the personal experience and strengths of more than 3,000 American respondents that happened to be going on and around and following September 9 of 9/11, 2001, they found that there was an immediate surge in feelings of gratitude after 9/11. Tough times, he shares, can actually deepen gratefulness. When times are good, we tend to take things for granted, the very things that deserve our gratitude. In times of uncertainty, though, we realize that the people and the circumstances that we've come to take for granted are actually of immense value to us. Emmons goes on to share that in the face of demoralization, gratitude has the power to energize. He says, in the face of brokenness, that gratitude has the power to heal. He says, in the face of despair, that gratitude has the power to bring hope. And in good times and in tough times, that gratitude turns out to be one of the most powerful choices that we can make. I think Emmons is spot on with this, more because of an experience I had in my life. And I'm going to go back and talk about something I shared with many of you. I shared a personal story when I did the service back in person at UUCP. It was actually the last in-person service that we had. And but I'm going to take this same story and present it through the lens of gratitude, because I've taken time to think of it through this lens and I see it very differently. So I had shared that I had breast cancer back in 2008, and that part of my treatment was 33 radiation treatments. And during that time, every morning, as I drove to work, because in the morning I would go to work and then I'd go to radiation afterwards, I would do a gratitude practice. And I would speak out loud what I was grateful for. And it was springtime, it was May, I love the spring. And I would say how grateful I was for the blossoms in the trees and the warmth in the air and the scents of these blossoms and the rejuvenation of life on earth. It brings me such joy. Now, what I was most grateful for and why I was so grateful was that just a few months before, when I was first diagnosed with invasive cancer, they couldn't determine how serious it was, and it could possibly have ended my life. And if it didn't end my life, I had no idea how aggressive the treatments were going to be. So I didn't know it was coming. And I was really shaken. I cried a lot. I was so frightened. And see, right before radiation, they said, you know, Sonia, we have some good news for you. It seems that this should be manageable. And the odds of reoccurrence, if you do this radiation treatment and some, medication, are really low. So I went into radiation with gratitude that I didn't have like massive surgeries that were pending, that I wasn't going that my life wasn't that threatened, that I didn't need chemo. Gratitude came naturally to me at that time because I was so relieved. And I'm sure that many or some of you may have had similar experiences in your life. See, when I spoke about this last time, I spoke about it through the shifting perspective that I had experienced, as though I had completely made the choice to be grateful. But the choice was naturally there because I was so shaken up. Gratitude in itself does shift our perspective. And now I am different. And I do open my eyes every morning. And the first thought that comes to me is, thank you for another day. And thank you for this healthy body. Wouldn't it be great to find our way to this space of gratitude without having first to be catapulted there through a trauma? Right? Wouldn't it be nice to just go to gratitude, to not have to be so shaken? So in my research through Dr. Emmons and some other sources, I've come up with four thoughts, 4 practices to consider to activate the experience of gratitude. And here they are. So the first, as we move into these 4 months to consider, is before a meal, to pause, take a moment, and recognize the blessing of food before you. It is a simple practice, but it does shift our consciousness. Consider how fortunate you are, or we are at that moment, to have food to eat. And in some Buddhist traditions, they take time to consider the source of the food, all the hands that touched it, that moved it through all the different stages from its origination to your house, your home, and to your plate. It's a great practice. The second option to consider is to keep a gratitude journal. I don't know, have any of you done a gratitude journal? You could raise a hand. Was that impactful for you? You can nod your head if it was, yeah. Mm. It really does work. In 2017, a medical study was held with people who had advanced stage heart failure. And it was found for them that after 8 weeks of journaling, the patients had improved their biomarkers considerably. And yes, there is an app. If you're an app person, there are apps for gratitude journals. And the third practice to consider is to talk about what you're grateful for. Mention it. You have a phone call, bring it up, share it with other people. It's contagious. And finally, and this is an uncomfortable thing to mention, but I think Sunday services is a good time to get real, is remember your mortality. Remember your mortality. Knowing that our lives are incomprehensibly precious and fragile and fleeting reminds us to stop in our tracks and take stock of every moment of what matters to us, every gift that we might have. I attended a service by Matthew Fox several years ago. Has anybody ever heard of Matthew Fox? He's quite a fabulous teacher. He is revolutionary in Christianity. And he shared in this service, he said, have any of you witnessed the birth of a baby or the death of a person? Have any of you been present? I know some of you are mothers, been present to the birth of a baby or the passing of a human being? And many answered yes. And his next question was that first breath and that last breath a sacred experience to witness? Was it sacred? And his final question was, then why aren't all the breaths in between sacred? The Hebrew word ruach has a dual meaning. It means both breath and life. And so does prana, the Sanskrit word. In many traditions, we see breath and life as the same. So in times where you might feel the need to step back to gratitude, and we do this often in our meditation practices, take a few moments to witness your breath and the sacred gift of it. It is always there as a reminder to us, effortlessly, just sustaining us. So I recently came upon a poetic writing by on gratitude by Christy Nelson. And she wrote about the question of perception in gratitude. And she talked about the common expression is the glass half full or half empty. And it's a long essay, so I can't bring the whole essay in, but I'm going to go to where she lands on it. She says, ultimately, in the thought at the end of this talk is that it doesn't matter if the glass is half full or half empty. Just simply be grateful for having a glass. Because without it, half of anything wouldn't really matter. Without it, the water that represents life would either be evaporated or a puddle. I thought that was interesting. The glass is the container for all our experiences, she says, and all experience and some people seem to know that noticing and being grateful for this container dwarfs everything else and can turn any and all contents of our challenges in our favor. What we notice, we give attention and we empower. I'd like to close. Well, I'm not going. This sermon's going to end in a slightly different direction than we usually do. But as we come to this part of the sermon, I'd like to share a story called the red dot. So a professor asked his students to prepare for a test. And his students awaited for the test, obviously a little anxious because it was a surprise, and he handed out the paper for the test face down. He said, okay, ready? Turn over the paper. And to their surprise, there were no questions on the paper. There was just a dot. And then he asked everyone, his students, to write about what you see on the paper. The students were very confused, but they went ahead and they wrote about what they saw on the paper. And at the end, he collected the papers and he looked them over and he started reading them out loud. And every one of them described the red dot on the paper, trying to explain its position on the paper. And at the end, the classroom went silent. And finally, the professor explained, I'm not going to grade you on this. I wanted to give you something to think about. No one wrote about the space that wasn't the dot on the paper. Everyone talked about the dot. What about all that white space on the paper? Everyone focused on the red dot. Same thing in our lives. We focus on the problem, our health, our financial issues, the disappointments, the past, what we want, what we wanted. The professor continued, the red spots are very small compared to everything we have in our lives, but they are the ones that consume our attention. And yes, not to dismiss that the attention sometimes, of course, needs to be attended to. We do have challenges and problems, and we do have to address them. But don't forget to look at the white of the paper. Don't forget forget to pause at that space. We all have so much to be thankful for. In Sufism, as we move on, in Sufism, it's encouraged not to be grateful for the good things in your life, but also for the challenges. But mostly, what's most important, they feel, is to be grateful for the capacity to feel gratitude. May the choice of gratitude support you in certain and uncertain times, and in difficult times, and in the times to come. And may, however, it help you as a tool as we move into these times. May it be so.
If you like this video, please click on the subscribe button and then click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video.